Hi booktube, Aaron here. I hope you're doing okay. I'm feeling quite grateful for cold weather at the moment. Um, After a very hot and humid summer, and then just sort of muggy, rainy days, we've had a bit of a cold snap here in South Wales, and I'm kind of enjoying it. I really relished putting on my scarf this morning when I headed out for the day. But anyway, today is, actually, today's Monday, but when you're seeing this, it will be Tuesday, which means Tag Tuesday. So I'm going to do the university tag, which was created by Joe Spivey, a new to me booktuber. I initially saw Steve Donahue doing this tag, and I went back and watched Joe's original video, and then he encouraged me to give it a go. So I'm going to try and do it justice. We'll see how well I do. The first prompt here: etymologically, the word university is derived from universitas, magistrorum et scholarium, meaning a community of teachers and scholars. What was the last book you read, written by two or more writers in coordination? And I'm cheating a little bit here. Well, firstly, I've got two books, but neither of these books were really, well, the first one was written by two people, but they were never really thinking of putting it all together as one book. But it's something I read, just finished, and it's the poems of Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And I read this for Victober, not really fitting in with any of the prompts, but I wanted to read some Victorian poetry. And so obviously we've got two writers coming together, and it was great to read their poetry kind of in the context of the other, getting a little bit of conversation between them a little bit. I really like Robert Browning. I sort of dismissed him a bit in the past, but I'm really enjoying him. But I'm really enjoying Elizabeth Barrett Browning, but particularly the sonnets. The sonnets from sonnets from the Portuguese, which I'd read some of them before and enjoyed them and thought they were nice sonnets. And then I read them this time, and it gave me shivers. And just love and death are so intermingled in those poems. It's sort of creepy, but really beautiful at the same time. And then just to cap it off at the end, it's got about 50 pages of their letter correspondence as well, which just reads like long, digressive conversations from a novel, really, from a Victorian novel. And then at the very end, there's a letter that Robert Browning wrote to his sister after Elizabeth had died, and it's just describing the illness and her death, and it's really devastating, but really beautiful to sort of steal Elizabeth's sort of last words. I thought I'd show something else where two people were acting a little more cooperatively in the creation of something. And this is something that, again, I read relatively recently. It's the Duino Elegies by Rilke, and this is translated by two people in cooperation. So it's translated by Vita and Edward Sackville West. So they were cousins, and it's an interesting way. It kind of makes sense, really. This is made up of a number of elegies. So we've got the second elegy there, just opening it up at random. And so they just sort of divvied up the elegies between them, and did sort of one each, and just went from there. And there are similarities, but they both do kind of have their own style. I think there is something a bit more musical to Vita, whereas Edward is a bit more exact in his approach. So that was quite interesting. And there's very few things where there have been two translators where it's made obvious to you who's translated each section. So yeah, quite enjoyed that. Number 2 is in 1088, the University of Bologna saw the advent of the university as we recognise it today. What is your favourite or the most recently read novel set in Italy? And I've again got 2 books because I couldn't quite decide. So I've gone with one of them, which is the most recent, and another one which is a favourite. I think the most recent novel I read set in Italy was Baudolino by Italo Calvino. Nope, by Umberto Eco. I sort of have been teetering on the edge of a Umberto Eco / Italo Calvino rabbit hole, and I was kind of in the mood for Umberto Eco after reading some Calvino. But yeah, it doesn't really help that I'm getting their names muddled up. But this is just a fun, I was going to say rollicking book set in the Middle Ages, and it's all about the medieval imagination and about lies and stories and relics and imaginary places, and it did. I was enjoying it all the way through, and then towards the end, I was really enjoying it. So there was a kind of slow takeoff in a way, but I didn't notice it too much at the beginning, but really at the end, then I kind of realised how long it had taken to really get going. But another kind of more all-time favourite of mine, set in Italy, at least I hope, at least a fair bit of it is set in Italy, is the Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, which is just a crazy, over-the-top, gothic, sort of romance, really, and it's over the top in length as well. She just goes on and adds all kinds of crazy subplots and stories within stories, just to keep certain plot points hanging. And I need to revisit this and loads of the gothic stuff that I was reading about 7 years ago now, when I was reading a lot of it. So that's a possible project for the future. Number 3 is university study usually involves a significant change of residence or lifestyle. What is your favourite book or series focusing on an immediate change of residence? Again, I've got 2 suggestions. The first one I'm reading or rereading at the moment, which is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And I mean, this whole thing starts off because somebody has just moved in to a new residence and is trying to work out why everyone's so weird and horrible. And so, although the whole thing is very settled and in one very precise area, the story wouldn't be being told if someone hadn't just moved into it and sort of intruded on it. And so in a way, this is all sort of hinging on a change of residence, but maybe to give a book that focuses a little more on that unfamiliarity and feeling out of place somewhere new, is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which does almost better than any novel, I think, in sort of creating that feeling of being so out of place and unwanted and small in unfamiliar surroundings. And then Hitchcock in his adaptation, does that wonderfully as well, with the furniture and the doors being just kind of dwarfing our protagonist. The 4th prompt: the 21st century university student is expected to fork out tens of thousands in order to breach the university's sun-gilt facilities. Name a book that cost you an exorbitant amount in exchange for very little reward. Trying to read my own handwriting there. I did find this one a little bit hard because, for one, I don't often spend a lot of money on my books, and even then, there are very few books that I've read where I feel like it wasn't worth buying them. Even books that I get rid of, in a way, I'm still happy to have had them. So yeah, I found this one tricky, but I went with a book I've recently bought, and again, I'm sort of dipping in and out of at the moment. And I am enjoying it. There's a lot in here to enjoy, but it is more than what I would have normally spent on something like this. And this is Songs from the Gallows, or the Galgen Lieder by Christian Morgenstern. It's translated by Walter Arndt, and this is German nonsense poetry. I picked this up just a couple of weeks ago, and it's what is it, like 137 pages long, and it's poetry, so it's not taking up an awful lot of space on the page, and it cost me secondhand it's a hardback, relatively good condition, but a bit sort of spattered and dirty, and it cost me £18, and it's not particularly old. It's from 1993, so yeah, it's a bit pricey for what it is, but as a book, I'm still actually quite enjoying it. So it's not a total waste of money. I just spent more money than I probably should have. Then number 5, universities and their attached student unions boast, and here we go, innumerable societies that gather zealots of everything from badminton to beard trimming to bardolatry. Name your favourite book that crafts or envisions a new world or alternate society. And again, I'm struggling with the handwriting. And for this, we're sort of stumbling onto what for a long time has been one of my favourite genres, and that's utopian literature. I just find it endlessly fascinating, and that of course includes dystopian literature. I don't really see that much of a difference between them. It's just a slight difference in perspective, really, or maybe sort of zooming out a bit to see how everything's actually working. But one of my favourite works of utopian literature is William Morris's News from Nowhere, which I just really love. It's a kind of, it is more or less literally a dream. A guy wakes up to find himself in a Britain that has suddenly become de-industrialized. I'm struggling to read the handwriting of my brain. It's been de-industrialized and is sort of a little more pastoral and almost anarchist in its sort of approach. It's sort of classic utopian communism, really, where everyone's just kind of looking out for each other naturally. There's a return to nature, and it's lovely, and it feels lovely when you're reading it, and I do find it fascinating. And there's a great scene where I think the protagonist realizes he doesn't have his pipe, and he wants to smoke from his pipe, so he asks this man for a pipe, and the man gives it to him. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, the man's just like, "Oh, keep it. I've got another one somewhere else, or if I really need one, someone else will give me one." And he's like, "Well, if you're going to give it to me, don't you want anything in exchange?" And it's like, "Well, why would I want anything in exchange? You need a pipe. I have a pipe. There you go." And yeah, I find that kind of thing really quite fascinating, and I've had friends who have studied economics where I've annoyed them to no end with, that kind of, what is to them just total nonsense. But yeah, I find that kind of thing fascinating. Number 6, what is your favourite novel set within the walls of a university campus? This is probably the one where I found it the hardest to actually find a single book. I couldn't really find many books where I could really remember it being primarily set in a university campus. So I had to settle on this. This is This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I think one of the major sort of plot points and changes, sort of developments in this novel is our protagonist going to, I think, to Harvard, but definitely to an Ivy League American university. And I can't really remember how much actually happens there. I seem to remember him becoming a little annoying when he's in university and finding the way he talks to his friends a bit annoying. Yeah, I can't really remember that much from this book actually, other than the end, which I did quite like. So maybe I should get back to this at some point. But I think him going away to university is at least one of the plot points in the novel. I can't really remember how intrinsic to the plot that is. Number 7, universities are touted as bastions of free thought and uninhibited expression. Name a book you've read that is produced by someone with whom you fundamentally disagree on the subject, but you like because of the eloquence with which it is written. Again, a fairly difficult one for me, mainly because I often assume that I'm going to disagree with an author in some way whenever I'm reading something. And so I couldn't really settle on something where I disagree, sort of fundamentally with the author. And so I thought I'd go with someone where I agree up to a point, but I just can't let myself go the whole way. I can't, there's something about what they're saying which does speak to me quite deeply, but at the same time, I just feel like they're not saying everything I want to hear from them. And that's Jean-Paul Sartre. That was terrible pronunciation. I'm just wincing at that as I'm saying it. And this is Nausea, which is a book I really like. I actually find this book quite funny. I think it's meant to be pretty funny. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about Sartre, and I can't quite put my finger on it, where what he's saying is, kind of amazing, and I do love it, and I think he's totally right. Up to a degree, but I can't quite settle on where that degree is. So I think mainly just my opinions and worldview is just much too hazy, and yeah, I'm not too fussed about it, to be fair. The next prompt is number 8. Universities pride themselves on cherishing outpourings from previously silenced or oppressed minorities. Name a favourite book written by someone from an underrepresented group. This is a book that is really from a group that is fairly underrepresented in my library, and it's at least an area that I'm becoming interested in and would like to know a bit more about, but at the moment don't have too much to represent it, and that's Japanese literature. And here I've got the stories of Akutagawa. I believe is sort of a early modernist Japanese writer, and yeah, I'm just really intrigued. I suppose for a while, Japanese culture was fairly underrepresented because they were totally cloistered from the West, and then there was a sort of outpouring. So I suppose you can take it that way. But as well, it's just an area that I'm intrigued in, but only has a very small little hold in my library, and I'm sure it'll grow eventually. So yeah, again, sort of dodging the prompt a little bit there. And then number 9, university study can be riddled with dense, um, impenetrable scholarly tomes. What is your favourite piece of interpretive non-fiction written by an academic? Again, the handwriting's giving me trouble. And again, I'm sort of dodging the prompt a little bit, because I immediately went to my non-fiction books and found that a lot of my favourites there weren't actually written by academics. They're written by just journalists or just professional writers, and well, journalists are professional writers, and yeah, very few of the ones I really loved were actually written um, by full-time academics. Um, and then I was thinking of some of the essays and things like that I would have read at university, and again, wasn't really much there. There's some that still intrigue me, but not much that I really love and really wanted to talk about. So I gravitated to this book, which it's an anthology. It's surrealist poetry in English, and it's not for the whole anthology, but it's edited and with an introduction by Edward B. Germain. I checked, and he was an academic. He was, where was he? Um, let's see, a teacher of literature at the Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, and he earned his PhD in English at the University of Michigan. So I'd say he would class as an academic, and it really is just for the introduction in here, which I think, is it just called surrealist poetry in English, or is it literally just called an introduction? I'm gonna have a look. Yeah, it's just an introduction, but it's just going through the surrealist tradition beginning in France, but then totally shifting focus and looking at how it influenced English speaking poetry. So initially English poetry and British poetry, and then it sort of goes out, sort of over the Atlantic. And it's great, and it really intrigued me, and I wanted to go beyond the bounds of this book, and I'm still intrigued to find some other surrealist poetry anthologies that sort of go beyond the realms of the English-speaking world. So yeah, that's again, I'm sort of sidestepping a little bit, since I'm just really talking about an introduction. But I really loved it, and I think I said, when I read this and I was talking about this book a bit on the channel, that I think it's worth getting this book just for the introduction if you're at all interested in surrealism, and particularly surrealist poetry. And there we go. That is the end of the tag. And I've forgotten to sort of work out um, who I should tag. So I think I'll leave this as an open one. So if you would like to do this, if it sounds like something you'd like to give a try, then please feel free to do so. Please consider yourself tagged, and I will leave it there. So thank you for bearing with and for watching, and I'm sure I'll see you soon. Take care.